Juice Wells and his addition is going to elevate Ole Miss to the top wide receiver room in the entire country.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Rebel Nation. I am your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. Today on Locked On Ole Miss, we dive into Lane Kiffin's incredible work building the top wide receiver room in the entire country. It all starts with the addition of Juice Wells, the explosive transfer from the South Carolina Gamecocks, and he has turned Tre Harris's head. Tre Harris, potentially the best wide receiver in the entire country, describes him as explosive, a super aggressive receiver when the ball is in the air. But Juice Wells and Tre Harris aren't the only stars. Deion Smith is now eligible and preparing for fall camp. He might be the most talented person in that room, by the way. This is the Locked On Ole Miss Podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers who make the show what it is. And don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy. They provide other perspectives on college football, the SEC, and heck, even Ole Miss. So check it out as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, these sports stop sporting the way we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone all day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So Juice Wells came to Ole Miss, I guess in December he committed, but he had to have surgery almost immediately due to an injury that he sustained at South Carolina. And because of that, Ole Miss shut him down. And they should have shut him down. He had his surgery after a 2023 season that he did not play that much. In 2022, he had 68 catches, 928 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Pretty impressive, pretty heady stuff for the young man. And he was kind of going into the 2023 season as the Luther Burden going in that. And the first team All-SEC wide receivers is like Luther Burden and Tre Harris. Antoine Juice Wells mentioned that he left South Carolina because basically the people that he went to South Carolina with transferred out, and he didn't necessarily want to play with a freshman quarterback like most people don't want to do. A freshman quarterback in the SEC is always a problem. He ended up going to Jaxson Dart, who is a really good quarterback. Now, it's no joke that Ole Miss has Tre Harris alongside of him. Tre Harris had nearly 1,000 yards last year. He's a first-team All-SEC preseason wide receiver, 54 catches, 8 touchdowns, and really just 9 games. Ole Miss has Jordan Watkins, who was the Mr. Reliable a year ago, had a broken hand, missed three or so games to where he was at full strength. 53 catches, 741 yards. I think with a full season, both him and Tre Harris go over 1,000 yards. And last season, Ole Miss also had Dayton Wade. So Ole Miss had a pretty good unit a year ago to go with a second year Jaxson Dart, who threw for 3,364 yards, 23 touchdowns, 5 interceptions a year ago. Jaxson Dart had a good year. Ole Miss had a good team, but it was problematic. And the weakness that Ole Miss had was whenever Tre Harris got injured and was out for the better part of, I guess, the Georgia Tech, the Alabama game, and part of the Tulane game, the offense really sputtered because he was such a focal point of that offense, to the point where Alabama won the game 24-10. Everybody talks about Ole Miss getting blown out that game. Ole Miss didn't have any wide receivers. They couldn't affect the ball downfield. Alabama used the boa constrictor to go up towards the line of scrimmage like they always do, and it just becomes really, really hard to deal with. So Ole Miss this season said, we need to fix this as best we can. And by as best we can, one of the ways they did that was Juice Wells. And Juice Wells, like I said, when he left South Carolina, it was toxic. And right now, this was just a couple of days ago. I think this is from SEC Unfiltered. Nick Amaniwari, I think is his name, tweeted out Judas Wells 2 days ago. I'm telling you, this South Carolina game is going to be a cauldron that Ole Miss is going to walk into, real similar to the 2021 Tennessee game. They're going to be jacked up. It is going to be imperative that Ole Miss has their head on right and gets off to a good start, because if this game gets in the second half, it could get wild. Just to let you know. But Juice Wells was brought in as a protection for Tre Harris. So if for some reason that happens again, there is another wide receiver that can go on the field that can take up the slack of a Tre Harris, somebody that has equal playmaking type ability, somebody that can affect the offense in a positive way. So he got brought in, and he is probably going to line up as a slot wide receiver on the side of Tre Harris to make it really difficult for teams to double team Tre Harris without completely shifting over their defense and opening up anybody that's seen Varsity Blues, an oop-de-oop type situation on the other side of the field for a Jordan Watkins or a Deion Smith, who has apparently made his grades according to On3 and 24/7. We'll talk about that in just a second. That is going to make the offense interesting. And the way they're saying, people are saying, why does this make the offense interesting? How does this work? And I give you this example. The 2019 LSU offense was not special because Jamar Chase was special. Now, he's a great wide receiver, but Ole Miss has had great wide receiver. Ole Miss has had A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf, when he was healthy, on the field at the same time. Why was that team so special? And that team was so special because of Jordan Jefferson, because of the other underclassmen wide receivers that were so talented. There were a lot of players on the field to where it was a genuine 5 weapons that Joe Burrow could affect the defense with. There wasn't a primary read. Now, you probably wanted to get the ball to Jamar Chase on those loosey routes and things like that, which they did frequently, but it wasn't the only thing. And the difference between 2019 LSU and 2018 Ole Miss, and besides the defense and stuff like that, was the quarterback. One was a top 5 NFL quarterback, and the other was Jordan Thomas, who's a good quarterback, but he's not quite at that level. Ole Miss this year is going to have all of those weapons that we've mentioned, the Deion Smith, the Jordan Watkins, the backups of Caden Lee and Aiden Williams and Nareel White, and you have Caden Priestcorn and Daquan Wright, and then you have Tre Harris, Juice Wells. With a third-year starting quarterback in a Lane Kiffin system, with the technology that Lane Kiffin can just say in his ear, yeah, this is the coverage they're doing. You basically cannot deceive him, because the speaker stays on until 15 seconds to go on the play clock. Ole Miss usually snaps the ball at about 21 seconds, which means until the ball is snapped, the speaker is going to be on. And there are going to be people that are figuring out how to use this at a high level. And Charlie Weiss Jr. has a famously photographic memory. So whatever you try to do, he can quickly recall that and get ready for the next step. Is really interesting stuff. And because of all of this, this wide receiver unit is going to be the most dangerous in the top wide receiver unit in all of college football. Tre Harris, number 1 on PFF against single coverage, an offense that is basically designed to prevent you from being able to double cover Tre Harris. You have Juice Wells, who was the talk of the town in 2023 at SEC Media Days before he got injured. You have Deion Smith, who was the National JUCO Player of the Year and is absolutely a freak with Randy Moss level ability. I'm not saying he's going to get there, but he has that level of ability, and nearly a full fall practice he's going to have to ramp up, and then 4 non-conference games to ramp up after that. And the running back, they've reloaded that as well. Like I said, a year 3 starting quarterback. This wide receiver room has a chance to be absolutely special. Coming up next on Locked On Ole Miss, Deion Smith's long journey to Ole Miss and Oxford is finally over. Apparently he's here and ready to make an impact, according to On3 and 247. Stay tuned. to hear about his arrival and what it means for the Rebels. You do not want to miss that. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home some huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all of that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, analysts, opinions, news, all streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Well, on Wednesday night on 3, and I think Inside the Rebels was probably the first one. David Johnson over there was the first to mention that Deion Smith had made his grades. We have all been waiting, and we've all talked about the fact that, hey, Deion Smith needed B's in these two classes to be ready to go for this season, and it looks like he has done that. I am excited for Deion Smith, and I talked about yesterday my journey going through academic and how I ended up in the Navy, and honestly how I ended up here. Deion Smith doing something similar to that, but he was able to dig his way out of it and become eligible. Listen, him becoming a Nick Brazel was on the table. It just was. But he did what was necessary, and his mentor of Shea Hodge helped him out considerably as far as keeping him focused. Now it's going to be on Ole Miss to essentially get him eligible or for the next semester. That's their job now. But this first semester, the regular season, that has been taken care of. And he is a really good football player. He is a special Randy Moss level talent. When you look at his highlights, it is absolutely nuts to see. But Deion Smith at Holmes County Community College, this was a year ago. He had 48 catches, 1,063 yards, 12 touchdowns. This was in 8 games or something like that, I believe. I believe it was 8 games he played in. He was a transfer from LSU. Stuff happened when people go to college. It can get weird. He's been able to dig himself out of the hole. When you look at what happened at Holmes County Community College a year ago, this was an offense that was, I don't want to say it was simple. It was a typical Mississippi junior college offense, and there was quarterback play issues that he was dealing with. It looked like whenever you see the highlights. And let's just bring those up now. When you look at him, he's unbelievably athletic. He takes a touchdown for 90 yards, and these are just the first half of the season highlights. At the end of the year, it was absolutely nuts to where he had nearly 500 yards or something like that in the last 3 games. But in the early part of the season, his athletic ability just took over. His catch radius. They used him really simple, running slants, running goes, running fades, real simple stuff to make his athletic ability really stand out because he was the best athlete on the field. There was not a better one on the field anywhere. And Deion Smith used that to make explosive play after explosive play. Whenever you look, he had 48 catches for over 1,000 yards. That is over 20 yards a catch. Even my Simpson County math can tell you that. Whenever you look at what he does and the way he lines up, they were not afraid to throw a jailbreak screen to him inside their own 10-yard line. That is how much of a plus athlete he is. That is how much, if he gets into space, you weren't bringing him down. He also returned punts for Holmes County Community College. He treated treated Holmes County Community College the way that 3 and 4A teams treat high school, honestly, where the best athlete does everything. And other than playing quarterback, he did do everything. But Holmes County Community College, I mean, they did what was necessary to have an explosive player on the field. Again, I think there was a 200-yard game and 3 touchdowns against like Northwest or somebody like that later in the season. Deion Smith on the field is everything you want from a football player. And we have seen players all the time. Being Ole Miss fans, we have all seen this, to where an elite junior college wide receiver gets there and he immediately becomes an elite wide receiver at the SEC level. Just because you haven't seen it, don't expect it. Don't just say it can't happen. Don't dismiss it. But Ole Miss does have the benefit this season of having Tre Harris, who, like I've said, the best wide receiver in the whole country, in my opinion. Having Juice Wells, who in the first segment, I gave you the reason why Juice Wells is like perfect to protect Tre Harris. And now this is what I call the oop-de-oop wide receiver for people that watched Varsity Blues back in the day. Whenever they're focusing the defense so much on one side of the field, and I do think that teams are going to have to focus their defense. They might not be able to double team, but their head's going to be able to swivel worrying about playmakers happening on that side, which is going to set up the number 3 cover man. He's not going to see a double team the entire season if the other side is as good as we think it is. And Deion Smith has a chance to eat. This is a really good deal for Ole Miss football. Now, the wide receiver room as a whole, unbelievable deep. Now, this is a situation where Ole Miss, playing as fast as they do not substitute much because they can't. It's just the way that works out. If you want to play that fast, the other defense gets to substitute and they can slow down the game if you substitute. So by substituting, you are voluntarily going slower than you want to go. So Ole Miss's wide receivers that they have in this potential 16-game schedule: Tre Harris, Juice Wells, Jordan Watkins, Deion Smith. That's 4 players right off that this time next year could be in an NFL camp. I mean, that's, pretty cut and dry. Aiden Williams, Caden Lee, who I think is a candidate by the end of the season to be making a name for himself. Real White, a couple of transfers whose names right now is not there, but I have not forgotten about you. One of which is like Devin Price and all of this. But the wide receiver room is 7-8 receivers deep of quality athletes to go with Real White, to go with several players. So we will see how it looks. But in this 16-game schedule, are they going to rotate much more? Are they going to hockey line this a little bit to where you might just see Aiden Williams get a series? Are they willing to do that is the question. But congratulations to Deion Smith. Congratulations. As somebody that was a tornado, like I said, between the ages of 18 and 21, I can recognize and can congratulate you honestly for what you accomplished. Now it's time to go do what you were brought here to do. The reason you showed up to signing day with a Lamborghini, you made it. You made it in the door. Now it is on you. And your goals this season, now remember them, was to lead the NCAA in receiving and go pro. Those 2 things. Now, with Ole Miss's wide receiver room, that's going to be difficult. It's going to be very, very difficult. But we're rooting for you, buddy. And we'll see how it goes. So thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day. We are emptying the note bag from the first part of fall camp. Get ready for some updates and key takeaways from this early part of fall camp. Do not miss it. You know, I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer and fewer games, and the sports just start sportsing the way we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep up with the sports whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up any bets anytime I am in the mood. Maybe I want to bet on Ole Miss and their over-under of 9.5 wins on FanDuel. Or maybe I want to bet on Jaxson Dart at plus 1,500 to win the Heisman Trophy. Heck, maybe I want to bet on Ole Miss at plus 1,500 to win the national championship. Now is the chance for you to do that. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, it's the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So we talked about the wide receiver units in the first two segments of this Friday show, and I do want to thank everybody for tuning in for it. Now let's just kind of stream of consciousness, talk about other things that have happened over the last, couple of days or whatever. And one of the things that have my attention that I want to talk about is apparently Jaquan Scott is playing some center and Caleb Warren has moved on out over to guard from what the media was able to see. And that leads me to a little bit of a thought exercise for Ole Miss football going into this season. In 2021, there was the player that transferred in from Utah. In 2022, Caleb Warren took over as the center. Caleb Warren, at least once, I think both seasons, has missed time because of injury. That's just the way it works. I mean, playing offensive line is not for the faint-hearted, essentially. But he's missed some time. And in 2022, whenever that happened, that was essentially a death sentence for Ole Miss's offense. You could not run even the whole offense and the jet sweeps and anything you were trying to time up because the snaps were so inconsistent and not exactly fast enough. Caleb Warren could do the job. The drop off from 1 to 2 was pronounced. In 2023, they had a better situation, but it still wasn't perfect. Whenever Caleb Warren went down, there was a drop off between 1 and 2. It is interesting seeing Jaquan Scott as a snapping option to start this fall camp because of what it could mean. We all know that Caleb Warren can do the job. If Jaquan Scott is truly good enough to be the starting center from day one at Ole Miss, that means that our backup, if for some reason Jaquan Scott goes down, would be Caleb Warren, which we all know that he can do the job as well. And if his snaps are consistent, if Jaquan Scott and Caleb Warren have a simpler tempo on snapping the ball, all of a sudden you're running jet sweeps, you're running everything that can make the offense a little bit more fluid. A lot more quick hitting stuff, a lot more timing based stuff. The centers allow that to happen. So I am going to pay attention for the remainder of fall camp right now to the center position for Ole Miss. I want to hear every update we can have about whether Jaquan Scott or Caleb Warren or even both are alternating as a starting center, because if their snaps can be consistent, if they can be consistently snapped back at a certain tempo, everything goes like whenever he lifts up his leg, there's a consistency to it. All of a sudden this offense could be unlocked a little bit more. And with the weapons that we've talked about in the first couple of segments and the running backs that Ole Miss has with it, this offense can really be unlocked. Really interesting stuff there. Offensive and defensive linemen, other than Cam Franklin coming in at 6'5", 275 pounds, you can't really make an offensive line or defensive line comment during helmets acclimation days. Once the pads go on, you'll start to see a little bit more takes on that. You're going to be able to see what the linebacker does once the pads come on. Princely Amami Ellen, it seemed like he participated as much as he could in fall camp. And we got one pass from Jaxson Dart through Juice Wells, putting on social media. I do want to appreciate John Sokolos for hooking all of us up with some video from camp. We do appreciate that. This early part of fall camp, Thursday night's practice ended late. It was before recording, so we had to do this a little bit earlier. We will talk to John Macon Gillespie on Friday specifically about that practice. That's going to air on Sunday, and get ready for next week when pads come on and all of that stuff. And it's going to become real. Practice is going to become a real thing. And you'll have all of these weapons that we've talked about. It's the most anticipated football season in Ole Miss history. The only thing that can come close to it was probably the anticipation coming up to the 1970 season. That was Archie Manning's senior year. That was the year he broke his arm against Houston. Everybody talks about what might have been. He was probably the best player in college football the year. That was also the year of him playing with a cast against the Auburn Tigers in the Gator Bowl. That was probably the only year that can compare to what this season is anticipation-wise. Lane Kiffin talked to his team and said, all these preseason accolades do not mean anything. But if you look at Lane Kiffin, he knows his team is good. He is well aware, and it is his job to manage expectations. You remember what Kirby Smart did 2 years ago whenever they interviewed somebody after Georgia just absolutely blistered TCU? And he said, hey, you all thought we were going to win 7 games, even though they were a consensus number 1, preseason door-to-door number 1, all of that. Kirby Smart had convinced his team that everybody thought they were going to only win 7 games. They had a chip on their shoulder. Lane Kiffin is trying to get that chip on Ole Miss's shoulder. All of the rat poison, everything that happened during the offseason, hype doesn't happen in a vacuum. People talk about you because you weren't being talked about, but it is going to be important that the players work at an extremely high level. So Lane Kiffin's going to earn the $9 million a year he makes this year. He is, because rat poison salesmen like me and around the country are going to say what they say. But Lane Kiffin, is going to be his job to make sure that it doesn't affect his team adversely. It should be really interesting. I hope everybody has a great weekend. And thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports perspectives. We pride ourselves in offering the most comprehensive perspectives on there, which is why we're the #1 Ole Miss podcast. Your support means the world to us. For your second listen of the day, check out Locked On College Football Podcast, Spencer McLaughlin, as you will get hyped for an exciting season with in-depth discussions, the upcoming games, the ever-evolving landscape of college athletics, from realignment to the portal to the NIL and the new playoffs. Spencer covers it all, honestly. You can find Locked On College Football on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And also, exciting news. You can now become a Locked On Ole Miss Insider, the best and easiest way to stay updated on all things Ole Miss sports. It's our texting program that you sign up for notifications that can be sent to you. So anything relevant that happens, you get that without all of the hassle of a message board filled with trolls. Enjoy 14-day free trials, experiences the future of college football coverage. We're adding new perks as we grow, so do not miss out. The link is in the description. And for all of those watching on YouTube, we are going to send you to Locked On College Sports Now, the new Locked On 24/7 streaming feed. So hotty toddy, everyone. Have a good weekend.